Time for Recoil. In the last episode, I talked about Recoil and how that's the next thing on my list of things to do. So today, we're going to start with that. Okay, I just realized I wasn't sharing the screen while I was recording that. Yikes. Okay, let's try that again. Let's take a look at what Recoil is already in the game as it stands. So specifically, we're talking about angular recoil. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and zero out the spatial recoil so that I'm not flying all over the place while I'm testing this. But you can see the angle of my ship changes every time a shot comes out. So the goal is to make this less just random and more just interesting. It's not really... Having a randomization to your aim doesn't add anything too interesting to the gameplay, in my opinion. Maybe for some games it's what you need, but for this game I want there to be a whole lot more value added from the recoil. I want you to be able to learn to negate it over time, and I want you to have to think about it and want to think about it while you're shooting. And I want it to add some more variation to the fights. So I did do some brain thinking earlier on the last episode, just trying to figure out what I really want from the recoil. So the first note here, could you really learn / perceive impulse variations? Not really, even harder given the inaccuracy of input. So what I'm talking about here is that the difference from shot to shot is too granular or too small of a thing, and it happens too quickly for it to really be meaningful to try to negate that. I think on a mouse and keyboard, like in PUBG or something, like in a FPS, there's enough precision there and enough responsiveness that you would be able to, on a mouse and keyboard, you can learn to negate that with your hand through like some kind of muscle memory. But in a top-down shooter and a twin stick, you really have one degree of freedom, and it's actually much less precise than you would think it is. Even if you don't think it's that precise, it can be pretty tricky to coordinate your thumbs that much. And like, you know, the difference between hitting and missing is like literally just a small amount of difference with your thumb. So I think randomizing or changing your position or your rotation at that time scale from shot to shot doesn't make for any interesting decision making or subconscious learning or whatever. It doesn't make for interesting gameplay. Instead, I want to focus on a bit of a larger time scale. So what I want to do here is make recoil impulses individually fairly consistent from shot to shot, but we're going to change the direction or the magnitude of that at a larger time scale. So you might fire 3 shots and then it'll change direction and fire 3 or 4 or 5 shots and push you that way, and then whatever. So that way there's potential for a bit more of a rhythm to the gameplay, where you actually have an opportunity to correct for the recoil. So there's a few ways we can make this more random or less random and facilitate the ability to learn something or to learn to negate it more easily or less easily. Now for direction and magnitude, I think these are a bit more of a subtle factor, or more subtle factors, and more difficult to perceive and react to, and thus probably more difficult to learn or make meaningful if it's more random. So I'm inclined to make this less random. It's going to feel random at first when you first pick up the game, but it'll be a set pattern of random values. So the hope is over time as you play the game, you can perceive this, or at least subconsciously, and learn to negate the patterns of direction and magnitude. In fact, I think for direction, I'm going to make it, at first, I'm going to try making it completely not random and very much predictable, and say that every time there is a change in the recoil impulse variables, I suppose, the direction is going to alternate. So we're always going to go left, and then we're going to go right, and then we're going to go left, and then we're going to go right. Now, the other interesting thing that we can tweak is the time interval between each change. So we can randomize this completely, or we could have a pattern to this as well. Now, I think it would be much easier to learn a pattern of time intervals than with direction and magnitude, or how much each shot is going to push you. We'll see if that's true, but at first I'm going to try an interesting idea of making this the same kind of thing where it's a repeated pattern that you might be able to learn, but I'm going to change that pattern each match. So every time you go into a game, there's a different rhythm to the recoil. Now, hopefully this will add another layer of interest to the feel of the game, so that you can kind of get better at negating these patterns throughout each match. And then throughout your lifetime of playing the game, you kind of learn, if there's maybe 10 or 5 different rhythm patterns, you can kind of learn all of those over the course of, 20 or 40 hours of gameplay, and get better and better at negating them. Now, of course, on top of all of these variables, there's a layer of dexterity. So it's not just a matter of recognizing and learning these patterns, even subconsciously. It's also a matter of negating them with your finger and being able to accurately negate them. So thankfully, since I've already implemented some basic recoil in the game, the slightly harder part of figuring out how recoil integrates into the physics of the player is already done, and we can jump in straight into the deciding how much of an offset do we apply each shot. In fact, right here you can see the actual piece of code that's doing the angular recoil. So all we need to do is kind of replace this random value with a value of our choosing. So to start, I think I'm just going to create the container for these different values and make a simple little way to populate those values, and then probably create a tool a very simple tool to generate different tables of values and save out the ones that I like. Now, with all that said, it's time to start up the stream over on Twitch and do some programming. Let's get into it. One more quick note before I go live. Later tonight, I will be joining Armand, my buddy Armand from Ubisoft Toronto, doing a co-stream on Twitch. So every Tuesday and Thursday we'll be doing this, and it should be a good bit of fun. We shall see. But if that sounds interesting to you, definitely give me a follow over there on Twitch and join us in the shenanigans. So I've done what I've described. I've implemented first pass of the new recoil system. You can see here I have a table of recoil impulse change intervals. So this is the time between each recoil change. And here I have a list of recoil magnitudes that it's going to switch between. So it might go to 3, and then depending on what's on this table, it'll wait for a bit, and then it'll go to 2, and then 5, and then 6. And you can see, and each time it changes direction. So you can kind of see it working here. If I just leave it alone, you can see this is the current recoil pattern. And if I put in some different values, let's say I make this range much shorter, so I go 0.1 second to 0.5 seconds. Every 0.1 to 0.5 seconds it's going to change. You can see that the direction change happens much more often. And if I do the same kind of thing here, making the impulse magnitude between 4 and 6, you can see that it's much more aggressive recoil. Right, so when I try to negate this, it's definitely a marked improvement. Like, I can definitely control this recoil more than I could the other one. I mean, the other one was just pure random, so like there's no real chance of guessing where it's gonna go. So I think I'm able to put more shots kind of on target if I'm just trying to aim straight up. And right now I don't have any like clear way of testing this or like a deliverable on it, but what I'm doing is just feeling it out and see if it kind of feels good. But I am seeing an issue, or I can see something that I can potentially improve. And it has to do with what kind of decisions I'm making with the input, with each recoil interval. Right now, every X seconds, the direction is changing, and the rate at which I need to move the control stick to negate the recoil changes. But with the relatively coarse inputs of a twin stick shooter, especially like on an old gamepad like mine, it's pretty hard to make that adjustment meaningfully. I think what we're going to try to do is change it from that to every X seconds I need to push the control stick in a certain direction to be correct. So I'm thinking instead of changing how quickly the recoil is moving you, I'm going to change where the recoil is moving towards specifically. I'm not really sure how to explain that more clearly. I have an idea in my head as far as how that's going to work and why that's advantageous. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and implement that and check back with you in a minute, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate what I'm talking about. Okay, so it was a pretty quick change to make, but I think I like it a lot better. Like, as you can see here, I'm able to hit on target a lot more consistently. And if I want to make that harder, I definitely can with the parameters I have. But just to show you what's going on, you can kind of see that it picks a position and goes to it with every time interval. This changes the problem from having to move the stick at a certain speed to in the right direction, to having to move the stick to a particular direction. Now, it remains to be seen how this plays out in combat, and especially when we have some spatial recoil like this, and you're moving, and you're trying to hit the other guy. People have very low health, so if you only get hit a few times, like how much does this recoil matter? Is this too accurate right now? But I think it's a pretty good basis to start from. At least it's deterministic, so it'll work with the netcode. I can test it out with my buddies and see how it goes. So hopefully the end result of this, in my mind, is every half to 1 second, or whatever interval that is, I need to think about which way I'm aiming. And hopefully this creates some more interesting combat. But it's there, it's working, it's a pretty simple system, so I'm going to go ahead and check it in and call it there for recoil today. I think that's all I'm going to cover with the vlog for the rest of the day. I am going to continue programming. I'm not sure what I'm going to work on yet. But again, I'm going to be hopping online with my buddy Armand, who's going to be doing some 3D art. I'm not sure what he's working on yet. It'll be interesting to see what side project he's got going on. But yeah, we'll be co-streaming on Twitch, so come check us out. Hopefully within couple hours of when I put this video up. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.